Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Wellness Blueprint. I'm your host, Dr. Caleb Davis, and as usual, I'm joined by the wonderful and talented and absolutely percolating Nicole Davis.
Ooh, percolating. I like this word. I
Nicole,
think it fits into our theme for today, right?
what are we covering today, Nicole?
We are covering my very favorite legal drug that I take every day to function.
And what would that be?
That would be caffeine.
That's right. So, a good friend of mine, very good friend of mine, Dan, who's a regular listener of the show, asked us to cover pre-workout and energy drinks and caffeine and coffee. So we just turned this all into one episode. So we're going to discuss this ever prevalent, ubiquitous stimulant.
I can tell you, I've taken pre workout a handful of times and my scalp felt tingly.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit too, because that's one of the best parts of pre-workout, if it has the product that does that.
Oh, okay.
From that morning coffee to those bright cans of energy drinks at the gym, these stimulants fuel our days, workouts, and sometimes even our all-nighters. But how much do we really know about them? Are they helping? Are they hurting? Today we'll uncover the benefits, the risks, and hidden truth behind these popular energy boosters. We'll also talk about surprising facts like the caffeine nap phenomenon, what really happens during caffeine overdose, and some lesser known alternatives. Plus, we'll dive into the detailed pharmacology and metabolism of caffeine, straight from the scientific sources. Nicole, I'm sure you're absolutely thrilled about that.
Yeah, mostly I'm just worried they're going to make me do dry February of no caffeine.
We'll talk about caffeine abstinence too. So grab your coffee or energy drink, or maybe reconsider it, and let's get started in the show.
Herbal tea. How about that?
There you go. That'll be a good alternative for you. As I'm prone to get into the weeds and the science a little bit about this stuff, so you stop me if you feel like it. But we're going to start with how caffeine is absorbed into the body and how it's distributed and metabolized. So caffeine is very rapidly absorbed. About 99% of the caffeine you drink is absorbed within 45 minutes of drinking it.
Yeah, I figure that.
Yeah, so that's pretty quick. And you'll have peak plasma concentrations about 15 to 120 minutes from absorption, meaning that's when it's most concentrated in your blood. And the half-life, which means how fast it's eliminated from your body, ranges from an hour and a half to 9.5 hours. It's influenced by a number of factors like age, if you smoke, if you're pregnant, if you're taking oral contraceptives, birth control, and many other factors. Also, if you're on an empty stomach or how hydrated you are.
Hydrated.
hmm
I guess they should have listened to our previous episode.
It's not too late. It's still there. Metabolism primarily occurs in the liver by the cytochrome P450 enzyme. That may seem irrelevant information to you, but all the med students out there or biochemists understand that it's a very commonly used enzyme that can be influenced a number of different ways.
Mm.
But it converts caffeine into paraxanthine, which is a metabolite that also contributes to its pharmacologic effects. How was that, Nicole?
Wow, I zoned out.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Man, if Nicole's not even listening to the podcast, we're doomed. So let's talk about some of the supposed or at least proposed benefits of caffeine. Some of the obvious ones: improved focus and alertness. Caffeine can enhance cognitive performance, particularly in tasks requiring sustained attention. This has been established for decades that this has this positive effect. It can actually have potential cognitive protection as well. Some researchers have linked regular caffeine intake to lower risks of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. And these are in some older studies that I found linking these, so I don't know if there's more up-to-date research that's given a little bit more of a conclusive link to this, but that proposal is out there.
Okay, but that's not as dubious a link as the whole, oh, you drink red wine and that'll protect your heart from heart disease.
Yeah, the studies aren't the highest quality in my book. You look at people who drink caffeine and the amount of caffeine they drink every day, and they looked at them over 40 and 50 years. And so there's a lot of confounding factors in these studies, exactly like the wine studies. So take that with a grain of salt. Athletic performance increases endurance and mobilization of fatty acids and helps spare muscle glycogen. So that can help with endurance in people who are trying to do high intensity athletic performances.
What does that have to do with caffeine?
Yeah,
I don't understand.
this is the benefit of taking caffeine.
Wait, okay.
So I talked about focus and alertness. I talked about
Clearly I need some caffeine.
Yeah.
No.
No. So we were going down a list of benefits.
Okay.
Improved focus and alertness, which you could use a little bit more of that.
Yep.
We talked about potential cognitive protection.
Yes.
And now I'm talking about athletic performance.
Okay, so caffeine will make you perform better athletically.
Increases endurance by helping mobilize fatty acids in your body and help spare some of the muscle glycogen in your body so that you can have better performance and endurance.
Okay, but the sparing glycogen thing, can you explain that a little better?
You have sugar or carbohydrates stored in the form of glycogen in your liver and your muscles, and you use that during intense exercise. And then basically, once you run out, you have to move into other energy stores.
So you're trying to tell me to eat more pancakes?
Where did you get that? Where did you even get that?
Because you said that it's stored in the muscles and stuff by using carbohydrates. And so if I eat more pancakes, then I have more carbohydrates
I
to
don't think
store.
I don't think I said the word pancake once.
No, I know, but
Not
that's
a
just the
single time.
logical conclusion.
You know what?
What?
Last episode, I told you there wouldn't be a quiz at the end of this. There's going to be a quiz at the end of this.
I've already failed.
Yeah. There's also some studies. Stay with me now.
Okay.
More studies.
Mhm.
We're talking about caffeine, remember?
Yeah.
All right.
Squirrel. Squirrel.
I do see that you're drinking a coconut water over there, which we talked about on the last episode.
Yes.
So you're staying hydrated?
I am staying hydrated.
Did you do hot yoga today?
I did.
All right. See,
Yeah.
we've said yoga already, so you don't need to bring it up for this
Okay.
episode.
Darn, you beat me.
There have also been some studies that have proposed that there may be some heart and cancer protection from caffeine as well. Moderate caffeine consumption is associated with a 15% lower risk of coronary heart disease and up to a 20% reduced risk of liver cancer and endometrial cancer. Again, a little bit of an older study, but these associations are observed.
Is endometrial cancer from the endometrial lining of the uterus? So,
Yeah.
like, endometriosis is a thing, but that's not cancer.
No, you can have endometrial cancer, unregulated growth of the endometrium.
Huh.
Yeah.
Didn't know that that was a type of cancer.
It sure is.
New fear unlocked for women everywhere. Okay, sorry. Please continue.
That's okay. All right, let's talk about some of the risks of caffeine. There's probably some pretty obvious ones. Nicole, tell me what you could think of for potential risks of caffeine.
I talk way too fast when I drink caffeine. So that's one downside. But the more serious downsides, were you going to say something or was I talking
I
too
was
fast?
just going to say you're like a hyper little joy bubble. You're just so happy and high energy all the time,
Yeah.
unless you are not on caffeine.
Yeah. One of the serious effects, though, is I've heard of Marines and other people who have very stressful, very high intensity jobs drinking really intensely caffeinated drinks and then their hearts give out on them.
The story you're talking about, I believe, was of two Marines who took a high dose of pre-workout, which is highly concentrated caffeine and then other chemical compounds before intensive cardiovascular exercise. And I believe two of them did die.
Yeah. And I know there's instances of other people who have felt like they were having heart attacks, almost went to the hospital, did go to the hospital, whatever. So caffeine can be too much
That's
on your
right.
body.
And we'll actually get into some of those hospitalization numbers as well. Probably the most common one that most people would experience is sleep disruption. So consuming caffeine within 6 hours of bedtime would reduce total sleep duration by at least an hour, estimation. And even moderate doses of 100 milligrams can delay sleep onset and reduce deep sleep. The people recommend that you stop drinking coffee. A lot of people just say by noon. That's an arbitrary number. But a lot of studies have said 6 hours before bedtime, which can leave a lot of room for depending on what time you go to bed.
Yeah, personally, if I have caffeine after 3 p.m., then I'm going to be in for a rough night of sleeping.
Yeah, I built up a huge tolerance to caffeine where I could drink a Monster and go to bed, but I don't have that tolerance anymore because I've weaned down since residency. There's also the caffeine crash. Has this ever happened to you where you drink a bunch of caffeine and you come off of it and get really sleepy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we'll get in a little bit more of the mechanism of action of caffeine here in a minute. But just in brief, caffeine acts by blocking a chemical called adenosine, which helps make you sleepy. It doesn't stop adenosine from being produced in your body. It just stops the receptor where basically it plugs in to make its action on your brain. And so once the caffeine's gone, all that adenosine's been building up and all of a sudden floods your receptors and makes you sleepy and want to crash. And then if you combine that with a big sugar spike from an energy drink and then also coming off the sugar spike, it's compounded an effect of just being sleepy. That's why you get a big crash from it. High doses of caffeine can also lead to arrhythmias. Do you know what that is?
Ooh, that's when your heart's beating irregularly. That could be quite dangerous, right?
It sure can. And also elevated blood pressure, increased heart rate in general. And this can be a particular big risk in people who already have pre-existing cardiac or blood pressure related conditions.
Right.
Then you can also talk about tolerance and withdrawal, which I have experienced both significantly. Dependence develops when you use it regularly, and withdrawal can cause headaches and fatigue and irritability. And boy, can it ever.
I feel attacked.
No, I'm talking about myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when I get off caffeine, if I go cold turkey, I'll get a splitting headache for about 3 days. So it's pretty bad. Lethal doses in caffeine are pretty rare. However, the fatal dose is estimated to be about 10 to 14 grams. Now, remember, caffeine is typically measured in milligrams. So we're talking about 150 to 200 milligrams per kilogram of a person's body weight being the lethal dose.
Okay, break that down for those of us who are a little
Well,
less
if
inclined.
you're 100 kilograms, then you would need multiply that by 200 to make that the milligram lethal dose.
So if your body weight's 100?
Yeah. When
Okay.
people talk about milligrams per kilogram, they're talking about your body weight. I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that. Yeah. The fatal dose is estimated at 10 to 14 grams. And if you want to get a little bit more precise, you're going to say 150 to 200 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
Yeah, except we live in America. Did you know that? So
Yes.
like,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Uh-huh.
I know we live in America, but medical science usually uses the metric system. I'm sorry. But if you can do a quick conversion because a kilogram is 2.2 pounds. If you got to go.
oh yeah. Oh, do the quick conversion for us there,
Well,
Dr. Big Guy.
100 kilograms is 220 pounds. Okay. All right.
Okay,
Man, you're sassy. Are you in caffeine withdrawal?
I am.
Okay. Anyway, let's just go easy math. That's about 100 cups of coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 100 cups of coffee. Symptoms would include tachycardia, convulsions, and vomiting, and then death. Do you ever see that episode of Futurama where Fry drinks 100 cups of coffee? And when he finally drinks his 100th cup, he like enters this Zen state of perfection and he's able to move at light speed and save everybody from a burning building.
I don't think I did see that episode.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there's another 35-year-old male out there who has.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of people, I was going to say a lot of people, but a lot of people don't listen to this show. So I guess that. So let's talk about the average caffeine content found in drinks, because I'm sure everybody listening to this is pretty familiar with caffeine and almost everybody who has had caffeine. In fact, it'd be hard to imagine somebody who hasn't had caffeine, really, in this country. Although I will say my dad's never had coffee and he's probably listening to this.
Yeah, but he drinks soda
He
products.
likes to drink Pepsi, yeah.
Yeah. It counts.
Oh, it's caffeine. It is. Absolutely. A Starbucks coffee, just a regular black coffee, a grande size, is 310 milligrams of caffeine. Some specialty drinks can exceed 400 milligrams of caffeine, the larger sizes, if you order extra espresso shots and things like that. I will say a regular cup of coffee on average is closer to 100 milligrams of caffeine, but Starbucks tends to have a higher content. Your standard 16-ounce Monster Energy has 160 milligrams of caffeine and 54 grams of sugar, which is equivalent to 13.5 teaspoons of sugar. So it's quite a bit of added sugar, although I never drank the sugar variety. Whenever I drank energy drinks, it's always sugar-free, which, yes, we are getting to that episode about artificial sweeteners. We'll get there eventually.
Oh, great. We're not pumping our body full of sugar. We're just pumping it full of chemicals. Hooray.
Yeah, everything's chemicals. We're all chemicals. Bang Energy, when that hit the market, that was one of the higher caffeine contents. It had 300 milligrams of caffeine, but it was all of those were zero sugar. And then what's touted as a little bit more of a healthy alternative is Celsius.
That's the one that I will occasionally drink if I'm desperate.
That's a 12-ounce can, and that has about 200 milligrams of caffeine and also 0 grams of sugar. There's lots of things, like Red Bull's another popular brand, Rockstar, Ghost energy drinks. The list goes on and on. There's so many things out there on the market.
Yeah, I remember. Do you remember the 5-hour energy droplets or whatever that you could?
Yeah, 5-hour energy shots. I think
Yeah.
those also had B vitamins and other things. It wasn't just caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these drinks have taurine and like other types of compounds that are supposed to promote energy as well. So let's actually talk about caffeine itself. It's the world's most widely consumed psychoactive substance. It's found in coffee, tea, energy drinks, chocolate, and even some medications. But how does it work? I can see Nicole's eyes glazing over already.
No. I'm just listening intently. I'm
Okay.
focusing. I'm using my little ADHD preventer thing to listen to you.
Very good. Very
Thank
good.
you. Mhm.
Caffeine is a plant alkaloid. You still with us, Nicole?
Alkaloid. I was trying to spell it in my head. ALKELOID.
The chemical name is known as 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine,
I'm going to throw this at you.
with a molecular structure resembling purines. Log that away.
Wow.
It works by blocking adenosine receptors, which typically induces relaxation and fatigue. Adenosine induces relaxation and fatigue. When caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, it results in increasing releases of dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine, and this enhances alertness and wakefulness. So caffeine consumption, as you know, and I think as everyone knows, is very widespread in the United States. And various sources contribute to their daily intake, including coffee, energy drinks, pre-workout supplements. Caffeine consumption is very prevalent among U.S. adults, primarily through coffee, but energy drinks are on the rise as well, especially in young adults. So I've seen a lot of numbers out there. The one that I settled on was about 85% of US adults consume caffeine daily with an average intake of about 135 to 200 milligrams of caffeine. Now, I saw some numbers that quoted up to 95% of adults, but it's really hard to nail that number down. As of 2024, 67% of American adults reported drinking coffee daily, marking a 20-year high, so it's always on the rise. Energy drink consumption varies much more by age group. 18 to 29-year-olds report that 31% consume energy drinks, and 30 to 49-year-olds report that 33% of this demographic consume energy drinks. And then pre-workout's a little bit more of a niche, but it's very common in people who do a lot of exercises, fitness enthusiasts, and they typically consume this product about 4 to 5 times a week, centered around exercises, hence the name pre-workout supplement.
Is that mostly weight-based exercises? Because if I were to do that before something like CrossFit, I'm pretty sure I would die.
When I used to use pre-workout, it was always around weight-based exercise. I would never take it before cardio exercise, but some people have done pretty foolish things. We'll get into this, but there's all these TikTok and Instagram challenges about people doing some pretty foolish things with pre-workout.
Anything related to TikTok challenges, I assume, is going to be idiotic.
You're showing your age, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love
No,
it.
it's true. Curmudgeon alert.
Uh-huh. So let's talk about the health implications and potential medical burden when coming to caffeine consumption. Emergency department visits related to energy drinks. Between 2007 and 2011, the number of energy drink related emergency room visits in the United States doubled from 10,000 to 20,000.
Well, that's because that's when the Rockstar and Bang and stuff really first started getting promoted. Red Bull and everything.
Yeah,
Red Bull has wings or whatever.
Yeah,
Wee
Red Bull's
wings.
been around for a long time, but all these other energy drinks started shooting up. So
Yeah.
the age group that's most vulnerable, or at least most prevalent, is 18 to 25, accounting for the highest number of emergency room visits related to energy drinks. The FDA recommends that you don't exceed 400 milligrams of caffeine daily. I should throw that in there.
And if you're pregnant, I think that's even
It's
a
even
smaller
lower.
number.
That's
Lower.
correct. Energy drinks, often containing high caffeine levels with other stimulants like taurine and guarana, have been associated with life-threatening cardiac events. Research indicates that these beverages can disrupt cardiovascular function, increasing the risk of arrhythmias and sudden cardiac arrest, especially in individuals with underlying cardiac conditions.
How do you know if yours has a combination of caffeine, taurine, and what was the other one? Guava? Guarana.
Guarana. It'll say on the label. It's all in the ingredients.
Huh.
I think that's a pretty common combination. That's why people are worried so much about Bang, I think, is because that one can is pretty much your limit for the day.
Yeah.
And you're drinking to go. When I was a resident,
Oh, no.
I drank more than one of those in a day for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, but I didn't drink them both at once.
Is guarana, that's not bat poop, is it? That
That's
reminds me.
guano.
Guano.
Guano is bad poop.
Yeah, I just remember from Ace Ventura.
Hold on. We are 22 minutes into recording, and that's the first time I mentioned poop. That's pretty good. Let's talk a little bit more about pre-workout supplements, because maybe not as many of the listeners are aware of what that is or what it contains. So it's designed to enhance gym performance. Most of them contain a mix of caffeine, creatine, beta-alanine, and nitric oxide boosters. A lot of people are familiar with creatine, I imagine. It's a very common supplement. Nitric oxide boosters just help with blood vessel dilation, getting more blood flow to your muscles, in simple terms.
Okay. What's the beta other one?
Beta-alanine is that compound that makes your scalp tingle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the scalp tingle one.
That stuff's weird.
Now, I don't think that's the intended purpose of having it in there, but I actually really kind of dig that sensation, to be honest with you. I've never done any sort of a recreational illegal drug. I've never used alcohol, but beta-alanine, I guess, is my...
It's your drug of choice.
It gives you the scalp tingle.
You know those scalp massagers? I feel like I ought to use one of those when you've taken
Oh,
beta
that'd be incredible.
Wow.
No, I haven't taken pre-workout in years. Years. So I haven't had that sensation in a really long time.
Well, now I know what to slip you when you're unexpecting.
Excuse me? Do you make it a habit of slipping things into my drinks?
No.
Yeah, very likely story. So let's talk about some of the benefits of pre-workouts. So the whole idea is increase energy for workouts. Caffeine delays fatigue, enhances peak power output, helps with endurance. We discussed all that. The nitric oxide boosters like L-arginine help promote better circulation of blood. It also helps people just focus and stay motivated in the gym, gives them that mental clarity so they can do the task and get it done. So, risks. We've already covered a lot of these risks. High caffeine may lead to palpitations, anxiety, nausea, and if you combine that with something that's already very strenuous on your heart, it can be significantly detrimental. And then there's the wild west of supplements, then you're never actually sure what's in your supplement. It's not that tightly regulated. And a lot of times there can be a lot of stuff in there that you don't necessarily know what's in it. So you need to make sure you're buying from a very regulated company who goes through a lot of testing to make sure they know exactly what's in it and that they have third-party testers that are verifying that it is true to the label. That's something you have to think about all the time. There are several reported cases, though, of pre-workout overuse leading to cardiac arrest. Just one case study that I read was about a 23-year-old male who collapsed during a workout after consuming a double dose of a high caffeine pre-workout supplement, and he died. Ooh. So this has happened. It's not an incredibly common cause of death, but it's common enough that you could find multiple case studies on this.
I wonder what year that was.
For this study, it was 2014.
Okay.
Chronic use of high caffeine pre-workouts can contribute to hypertension, which is high blood pressure, strain on the kidneys, elevated cortisol levels, which we've talked about in past episodes, and it can increase long-term risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, we talked about that maybe moderate to low intake of caffeine and coffee might actually be cardioprotective, but chronic abuse of it may actually lead to cardiac problems. So it's a balance. Let's dive more into now just energy drinks, commercial energy drinks. Nicole, do you drink energy drinks?
I drink Celsius typically.
How often do you do that?
Oh, I've cut back lately, actually. I would say I'd have it maybe up to 3 times a week at my maximum, but now it's more like once every 3 weeks.
What's your caffeine delivery system of choice?
In the mornings, it would be coffee.
You just drink black coffee, right?
I do.
From a drip machine?
I do, although when I'm feeling fancy, I have a French press and I have a pour over. And then if I have my favorite sexy barista make me something, then
who's that?
That would be you.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Then I would be getting myself a latte from a latte.
Thanks a latte.
But then in the afternoon, if it's not too late, then I like to have some caffeinated green tea or black tea that's got a little bit of caffeine, but not quite as much as coffee.
Taper down.
Yeah. Taper down.
Exactly. Gotcha. So you're not a big energy drink consumer.
I try not to. That's really only reserved for emergency situations where I'm late on my way somewhere and need caffeine, but don't possibly have time to drink like a hot drink.
You don't want to drink. You don't want to sit in a 40 car line at Starbucks.
Yeah, I do remember that one time we were going to the airport at a super early time in the morning and I chugged like half of a Bang or something, or a Rockstar.
That sounds familiar.
And then I spent like the next half hour in the airport throwing up. So it can have a bad effect on me if I am sleep deprived and have that much caffeine in a higher stress situation like traveling internationally. That's a no-go for the Nicole.
Yeah.
No
All right.
go.
So Nicole's not a big fan of energy drinks. All right, no problem. So a lot of energy drinks are very high in sugar. Some of them contain up to 50 grams of sugar, but they also make a large variety of those that are sugar-free with artificial sweeteners. Some people actually have mixed these energy drinks with alcohol, and this can be a dangerous trend because it helps mask intoxication. It delays that feeling of intoxication because you're having all these powerful stimulants.
I'm guessing that's worse than like a espresso martini.
Well, that would be an example of mixing caffeine and...
Yeah, but I'm guessing that the energy drink version is probably worse because that's a higher concentrated dose of caffeine.
I guess it depends on how much espresso you use.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never had one of those. As we mentioned before, there are case reports of people over-consuming energy drinks leading to arrhythmias of the heart, seizures, and hypertension. And then there's lots of reports about excessive caffeine triggering anxiety, restlessness, and panic attacks in people who may be susceptible to that sort of thing. There's actually sections in the DSM-5, which is one of Nicole's favorite books,
Ooh, yeah, it is,
talking about caffeine abuse or caffeine leading to induction of negative side effects associated with psychiatric disorders.
Very nice. That was pretty sexy. You brought that up.
Thank you. I did that for you, babe. Regular consumption of energy drinks has been linked to chronic insomnia, increased stress, and higher risks of metabolic syndrome due to prolonged exposure to high sugars and caffeine levels. Now, if you take the sugar out of the equation, I don't know that metabolic syndrome would really be associated with this, but you can definitely see the insomnia and increased stress and blood pressure problems.
I wonder if restless leg syndrome becomes an issue too. I feel like that was always worse for me when I was trying to sleep and I'd had a lot of caffeine.
I'm sure it doesn't help, especially if you already have restless leg syndrome. So, this is something that I read about, which I don't think I've ever actually used this, but have you ever heard of the caffeine nap?
Well, I just assumed that would be the crash you get.
No, apparently, and this is new to me, apparently drinking caffeine about 20 minutes before a nap can maximize your alertness when you wake up from your nap. If it takes 45 minutes to absorb it in your bloodstream, you take it before the nap, then you wake up without feeling groggy. Apparently, people use this so that they can have a nap in the middle of the day and then still be super alert and awake. Have you ever fallen asleep in the middle of the day and you woken up and not know where you are, what day it is?
Yeah, like 4 times a week. Yeah.
Wow. She's a hard napper. There's some interesting medical applications when it comes to caffeine as well. It's not all just recreational. Caffeine has a vasoconstrictive property, which means that it helps tighten blood vessels. And this is actually used in some migraine treatments to narrow dilated cranial vessels that are associated with migraine headaches.
Yeah, I feel like that was in Excedrin when I used to take that for migraines
Yeah,
way back in the
I'm
day.
pretty sure it still is.
Back when I didn't drink enough water and I would get bad headaches.
Yeah, you don't get headaches as much now that you're nice and hydrated, do you?
Yeah, well, the combination of hydration and also working on my back muscles so that
Hmm.
my back and neck posture isn't as bad. That's
And
really helped.
as we know, it's not all just about drinking water, right?
That's true.
What else is there?
There is salt and electrolytes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Last
And
episode, go check it out. We got into all the health benefits and risks of caffeine in particular, but there are a lot of people who have talked about whether coffee in particular is good or bad for you. So I did want to talk about that a little bit. So let's just take pre-workout and take energy drinks out of this equation because we're talking about coffee in particular because coffee is touted to have a certain level of antioxidants and other compounds that have been studied that may help with longevity and other different types of health issues. It's been proposed that coffee might help with cancer prevention. There have been studies that have showed that regular coffee consumption is associated with a 40% reduction in the risk of liver cancer. The protective effects are thought to arise from coffee's ability to lower liver enzymes and reduce inflammation, although that's still not perfectly sussed out. As we mentioned before, endometrial cancer and colorectal cancer have also been shown to have lower rates in people who drink 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day. Now, whenever you're looking at population studies like this, where you observe people over time, it is important to realize that you can only take so much information from this because there may be a lot of other confounding lifestyle factors at play here. That's something I try to think about whenever I read any kind of study. Neurodegenerative diseases as well, coffee may have a protective effect. Caffeine may delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease by reducing beta amyloid plaques in the brain. Research suggests that up to 65% of a lowered risk for regular coffee drinkers consuming 3 to 5 cups per day. Again, almost all of the data I found on this were older studies, so I'd be really curious to see if there's people doing more recent research on this because this is the science constantly changing.
when you say older, do you mean like early 2000s or do you
Yeah,
mean
I'm talking
1960s?
early 2000s.
Okay.
I would be curious to see if there's something more recent, but this is what some of the more prevalent studies that I found. And then there's also lots of studies that show that coffee drinkers have up to a 30% lower risk due to caffeine's neuroprotective properties of developing Parkinson's disease. Again, this is all with a grain of salt. If you're not a big coffee drinker and you don't want to drink coffee, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have your brain's going to degenerate. Moderate coffee consumption has also been shown to help reduce risk of coronary artery disease, being heart disease. Coffee's antioxidants compounds have been proposed to be the mechanism for why this is. But as we discussed before, too much coffee, too much caffeine can actually cause damage to your heart potentially. All right, so this is a super interesting one. I think. I learned this probably within the last year or two. Did you know, Nicole, that the way you brew your coffee might actually change its health benefits?
Actually, I did know that.
What do you
I,
know?
I'm not sure if I remember it correctly, but it has something to do with uh, if you use a liner in your coffee, the oils from the coffee beans can have an effect on your cholesterol.
Yeah, look at you. Look at the
Yeah.
big brain on Nicole.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So
That's
it
how
has,
they know me, Big Brain Nicole.
that's her nickname. So it's unfiltered coffee. So think French press and Turkish coffee. Unfiltered brewing methods allow higher concentrations of certain compounds in coffee to remain in the coffee, and this has actually been shown to increase LDL cholesterol, which
LDL's the bad.
that's what most people would call the bad cholesterol. Studies have shown that consuming 5 to 8 cups of unfiltered coffee daily can actually increase your LDL cholesterol, potentially elevating cardiovascular risk. Filtered coffee, like a drip coffee machine, effectively removes all of these compounds, and then there's no real LDL cholesterol effect at all. So if you have cholesterol issues or are concerned about this, you might want to skip the French press or Turkish coffee.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the reasons why I stopped doing French press for a while, even though
Yeah.
it's delicious.
Do you find French press is better tasting than other coffee?
Honestly, so much goes into it, Caleb. It's anything from the quality of the beans to the grinding experience to the heat of the water and the shape of the carafe in your hands. It's getting very sensual thinking about it. So,
That's not the first thing that came to my mind, but I guess you're really into coffee.
there's a lot of factors there at play.
Yeah. I think it's pretty exciting to talk about what good things coffee might do for us, but coffee may contain these beneficial antioxidants, and when consumed in moderation, they might actually have some health benefits. But the method of preparation is important, and if you're concerned about cholesterol levels, you may want to worry about the filter. And also, you have to really make sure you're consuming it in moderation, and also you have to think about the context in which you're drinking it. If you're adding lots of cream, lots of sugar, and other things, you're probably having more negative health side effects than you're getting any benefit from.
That's true. If your coffee is just a delivery system for heaps of sugar, that's maybe not great.
Yeah, probably not good for your heart.
People used to ask me, how do I like my coffee? And I would say, black, like my soul.
But your soul's not black
I
at all. You're just
know.
such a happy person.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's true.
The joke doesn't really work for you.
No,
It
I
worked
guess
better
not.
for me. So let's talk about people who may want to avoid caffeine or at least significantly limit their consumption. People with anxiety disorder, caffeine, as we talked about, is a stimulant and it can exacerbate anxiety symptoms. It can lead to increased nervousness, restlessness, and even panic attacks in people who are susceptible. People with a pre-existing heart arrhythmia or severe blood pressure issues should also significantly cut back on their caffeine or consider not consuming it at all. Interestingly enough, people with heartburn or what we call gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD for short, caffeine can help relax the lower sphincter of the esophagus and worsen acid reflux symptoms.
Wait, there's more than one sphincter in the body?
There's sphincters all over the place. There's
What?
sphincters galore, babe.
I only knew about the one.
Oh no, we got sphincters all over this.
Maybe that should be a fractured fact.
Yeah. We'll just do a sphincter related episode sometime.
That would probably get a lot more downloads.
Yeah, maybe I don't want that kind of attention. No, the esophagus has an upper and lower sphincter, and if you are dilating the sphincter and allowing more of the contents of your stomach to get up into your esophagus, it can actually worsen your heartburn.
Okay, because I was going to say I would expect that drinking coffee, which is pretty acidic, I think,
Sure.
that would actually worsen things for somebody with GERD.
Yeah, that in particular probably doesn't help things either. It probably adds compounds that affect. So we already talked about restlessness and sleeplessness. So people who tend to have problems with insomnia should also probably avoid or cut back caffeine or only have it first thing in the morning and try to avoid taking it much during the day.
Okay, so if you have GERD, don't drink coffee.
Caffeine might just exacerbate it. We're talking about caffeine in general. The coffee might even be worse with this acid.
Gotcha. Okay.
People who are pregnant, high caffeine intake during pregnancy has been linked to adverse outcomes such as low birth weight and preterm birth, meaning they deliver too early. So it's generally recommended that pregnant individuals limit their caffeine consumption pretty significantly. During my research for this episode, I found some articles suggesting that caffeine can, in some way, contribute to osteoporosis. This was actually new information to me. There are some studies showing that excessive caffeine intake can actually interfere with calcium absorption from your diet, potentially contributing to bone density loss. But I dug into this a little bit more, and those studies show a very limited effect, and there's other studies that show that it has no significant effect whatsoever. So I added on the list as a curiosity, but that's not really super high on my level of concern. And then certain psychiatric disorders, not just anxiety, can be exacerbated by caffeine, like bipolar disorder, and it has actually been shown to trigger manic episodes or increase anxiety. What practical tips can we give you for day-to-day use? Let's talk about how to optimize caffeine use safely. Stick to safe limits. The FDA recommends no more than 400 milligrams of caffeine daily. That adds up to about 4 to 5 cups of coffee, but that's just like your Folgers coffee at home. It's not a Starbucks. That's the Starbucks coffee. That's going to be way more.
Can I ask a controversial question?
Yeah.
Are we actually trusting the FDA on this? Because we don't necessarily trust them on things like the food pyramid.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think when it comes to limiting things, they're more on the conservative side, which is so am I personally. I don't think you should really be trying to consume much more than 200 to 300 milligrams myself. So I think I'm comfortable with following this guideline on this particular topic. Avoid caffeine at least 6 hours before bedtime. But personally, I stopped drinking caffeine after lunchtime. Pair it with hydration. Balance caffeinated drinks with water to help you stay hydrated. Now, as we discussed in the last episode, a small amount of caffeine doesn't necessarily dehydrate you, but if you're constantly consuming caffeine throughout the day, it can have a little bit of a dehydrating effect. Try to choose low sugar options. If you can, just drink black coffee. That's the best. Unsweetened tea or natural energy drinks without a lot of added sugar would be better options. And then maybe consider cycling your caffeine use. I'm doing that right now. I'm having just my one coffee in the morning and that's it. I'm avoiding any caffeine related energy drinks, sodas, tea, coffee after my one coffee in the morning. That's it. I'm trying to cut back because I'm trying to decrease my dependence on it. And then it's also important to try to avoid sugar crashes. A lot of times people get these super hyper sugary drinks from Starbucks that are just loaded with caffeine and sugar, and then they have nothing else, and then they have a huge crash. So if you're going to drink coffee, I would encourage you not to have so much sugar with it and maybe pair it with some protein to slow down the absorption. Before we wrap up completely, I would like to take a break for Fractured Facts.
Ooh, love it. Are we going to talk about sphincters?
No, we're not going to talk about sphincters.
Okay.
All right. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fractured Facts, the segment that is not about sphincters. Since we're talking so much about caffeine and energy drinks today, I wanted to talk about the ultimate stimulant.
Oh.
Do you know what that is?
Well, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, you got it. Cocaine. So just because we're talking about stimulants, cocaine came to mind. Yep. Believe it or not, this infamous drug actually has a fascinating history in medicine and surprisingly is still used in certain modern medical settings. So let's go back to the history of cocaine. Cocaine was first isolated from the coca leaves back in the mid-1800s. Back then it was celebrated as a medical marvel. Doctors thought it was the ultimate multitasker. It helped relieve pain, it helped boost your energy, and even treated depression. Speaking of depression, Sigmund Freud was actually a big fan of cocaine himself. He wrote lots of papers talking about all of the benefits and potential of cocaine being a cure-all for multiple problems. Spoiler alert, that did not end well. But here's where things get really interesting. By the late 1800s, cocaine was being used in some truly groundbreaking ways. Have you ever heard of a local anesthesia?
Yeah,
Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
So cocaine was actually the very first substance used as a local anesthetic. In 1884, Dr. Carl Kohler, an ophthalmologist, discovered that applying cocaine to the eye numbed it so that he could perform surgery. So this was revolutionary at the time. For the first time, he could do surgery without putting patients completely under or without him having to endure significant amounts of pain while operating on the eye.
I wonder how he stumbled upon that. Was it like somebody in his office was sniffing cocaine? That's a mechanism for taking it, right?
I guess
Sniff it.
snorting.
Snort it.
Yeah.
This is somebody who's snorting it, but then they
I
like
guess
sneeze.
I guess sniff is like a polite snort. Can you imagine? Here's just a, just
Yeah.
a little sniff.
So maybe they were sniffing it instead of snorting it, and
No one's gonna worry that we have used cocaine, by the way.
and maybe it tickled their nostril hairs, and so then they sneezed, and then the cocaine flew everywhere, including into the eye of the patient. And they were like, I can't feel my eye. And the doctor's like, hey, let me take this scalpel and try to carve some stuff out. And that's how he determined.
This sounds like an episode of Sawbones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should ask them. I love those guys.
I don't know how he first. I imagine people felt that there was numbness in other areas when they had cocaine, so that's probably how they experimented with that.
Mm.
So let's talk about the mechanism of action of cocaine. Cocaine is a sodium channel blocker, and it has a sympathomimetic effect, meaning it activates your sympathetic nervous system.
Oh, okay. So there's a difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic
That's right.
nervous system, but why don't you explain what the difference is?
Sympathetic is more of the fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic is what I like to call the rest and digest response.
Okay.
So sympathetic means you're getting all amped up, ready to fight a bear in the forest.
Right.
Yeah,
Or a man.
or a man. But which one do you choose?
Yeah.
Cocaine affects the nervous system and the heart. Cocaine inhibits the reuptake of certain neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin at the synapses in the brain. So they're just staying floating around in there instead of being reabsorbed. So when you experience something pleasurable or stimulating, your brain releases dopamine, the quote unquote feel good neurotransmitter. Normally, dopamine would be reabsorbed quickly, but the cocaine helps block that reabsorption and it sticks around. So you're getting this feeling of euphoria and energy and focus.
No wonder.
But really, the more interesting mechanism is the sodium channel blocking in nerve cells. We talked about this in the last episode, actually, where you have to have a very specific gradient of ions across cell membranes to be able to transmit nerve signals, electrical signals down nerve fibers. You remember we talked about that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you block the sodium channels that help maintain that gradient, then you're not firing these transmissions down the nerves anymore. So that's how it has that anesthetic effect that you just basically temporarily numb the nerves. Now, as you might listen to the name cocaine and think of that ane at the end, you may think now about lidocaine, novocaine, marcaine, bupivacaine. These are all sodium channel blockers that developed
Ah.
afterwards. And
Sneaky.
that's right. So they all have the similar mechanism, but don't have that same euphoria and are just local anesthetics. But that's the same root word. Now, cocaine becomes even more specific for a surgery because it has a very specific vasoconstrictive effect. So it narrows blood vessels. So if you're doing things like eyes, ears, nose, throat surgery, applying cocaine can be a local anesthetic and decrease bleeding during surgery. It's actually one of the nasty side effects of cocaine, if you are one who sniffs it, that you can actually lose blood vessels in the septum of your nose, the membrane between your nostrils, and it can actually decay because it dies without blood flow. You can literally erode away the septum of your nose.
So then you look like Lord Voldemort.
I guess that's a possibility. Do you think
Yeah.
he was a crack addict?
Probably.
Yeah,
They're
he's
just playing a
really
fun
big
now.
into the coke. So cocaine is still used, albeit very limited and very restrictive, in ear, nose, and throat surgery in the modern medical world today. I never have any use for it in my medical practice, but it is used and heavily controlled. Cocaine is one of those drugs that has a really interesting history and a really interesting mechanism, but obviously there's a lot of harmful side effects. Elevated heart rate, hypertension, arrhythmias, and heart attacks are not uncommon when using and abusing cocaine.
Wasn't it originally used in Coca-Cola? And that's one of the reasons why Coca-Cola has its name?
I believe they used small amounts of cocaine in Coca-Cola a long time ago, but yeah,
A
they
long
don't.
time ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they don't anymore.
I remember going to, there's this little like historic medical museum in New Orleans. You remember
Mhm,
that
I
place?
do.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Shout out to them. But I vaguely remember there being a display about how doctors would prescribe it, particularly to women who are in quote hysterics,
Mhm.
and that would help calm them down. Well, not really calm them down, but make them feel better, I guess.
No, it's pretty crazy to think about all of the different substances people used willy-nilly back then. I don't recommend most people using cocaine in almost any setting.
Yeah. I wonder what it is in our current generations that people 200 years from now are going to look back and go, y'all were dumb.
I'm sure there'll be something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get back to the episode. We'll wrap up. So here's my final thoughts on caffeine. You can enjoy caffeine responsibly, but it does have its pitfalls. Track your caffeine. Pretty much any commercial product that has caffeine is going to tell you how many milligrams it has in it. So try to stay under 400 milligrams. And you may want to consider cycling down where you try to lower that dose significantly more to see how you do with it. Make sure you're hydrating, pairing it with other drinks, not just your coffee and tea and energy drinks. Try not to rely so much on caffeine drinks for energy. If you're finding that you have to drink coffee and caffeine and energy drinks every single day because you're not getting adequate sleep, that may be a sign that you may want to change some things. And then read your labels. Pre-workouts, energy drinks, especially those two, they can have all sorts of hidden ingredients that you're not considering. And make sure you're buying from a reputable company.
Okay, so what was the trifecta of concerning ingredients? Was caffeine, taurine, and
Guarana.
guarana.
And there's other compounds out there I probably haven't even heard of that can cause problems. And with these less reputable pre-workout companies, they may have stuff in there that's not even on the label.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you can't drink energy drinks. I'm just saying, think about how much caffeine you've consumed, how much food and water is in your system, whether you're going to do something super strenuous, whether or not you have some sort of underlying heart condition. And just listen to your body. If you're having palpitations, if your heart feels like it's beating out of your chest, if you're having increased anxiety, if you're not sleeping well, maybe it's time to cut back. So caffeine, pre-workout supplements, energy drinks, these can all be very powerful tools for energy and focus, but they come with risks if used unwisely. So remember, moderation is the key. If you have any questions or stories to share about your caffeine addiction or your abstinence, I'd love to hear it on our social media. Nicole, what do you think? Are you going to cut back on your caffeine?
Actually, I think I've been telling you that in the last few weeks, I've been more reliant on it, especially if I want to avoid my afternoon naps.
So what are your thoughts? Do you think this is something you'll want to track or see how much you're actually consuming? Or do you think, nope, I'm perfect. I can quit anytime. I can quit anytime.
I think it's worth tracking for sure. Yeah, because I think I drink about 1.5 of my mugs worth of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And then I drink another source of caffeine a little after lunchtime.
Yeah. It might not be that bad what you're consuming. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to track and see.
Yeah, for sure.
So I can personally tell you that monitoring my caffeine intake and limiting it down to just one serving a day now and staying really well hydrated has been very beneficial for me. I get better sleep. My energy is more regular. I don't feel like I'm relying on it anymore. I'm not worried about getting that caffeine so I don't have a splitting headache later in the day. So I'd recommend everyone consider doing the same, at least observe how much caffeine you're consuming to see if maybe it's something you would consider. And I definitely recommend cutting back on the cocaine if you are using it. So remember, everybody, be humble, be happy, be healthy, and get off that cocaine. We'll see you next week. Hey, listeners, if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review on whatever platform you're tuning in from. Your support helps us reach more people and bring you even more great content. Also, be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Wellness Blueprint Podcast. We're also on Facebook as The Wellness Blueprint with Dr. Caleb Davis. We also have our website, drcalebdavis.com, for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Thanks for listening.